So, last night was absolutely major for the NRL competition. The South Sydney Rabbitohs go down to the Sydney Roosters, 26-12 in a major contest for the race for the 8. This means the Roosters go through to the final series, maybe, judging on a couple of results coming on this weekend. But the South Sydney Rabbitohs miss out on the final series, first time since 2017, which is absolutely crazy to think about, especially when you think about a team that took down the Panthers, the Broncos, and the Melbourne Storm early on this year, back to back to back in 3 major games, where defensively they looked absolutely outstanding. What happened? Why did the Rabbitohs go from premiership threat to now missing out on the finals? I got 2 reasons that I thought about last night that did pop into my head. Obviously, the first one I'm going to be talking about is probably not more so what the media are going to be talking about. But the second one, possibly I can predict that the media may shift towards this narrative. But this is all off the top of my head. This is just me looking into the season a little bit more for the Rabbitohs and what could have derailed this season for the Rabbitohs. My first reason for the Rabbitohs losing it this season is injuries. And you're going to say, obviously, you can't really excuse a NRL team for injuries or why they've fallen off from a actual premiership threat to all the way out of the 8. A lot of teams have dealt with injuries this year and stayed within that 8 period. My New Zealand Warriors had a whole lot of injuries during the mid part of the year where, you know, in major games, we had a whole lot of players drop out of injury. Tamari Martin, Jazzy Tavanga obviously missed a whole lot of year for injury. A whole lot of other key players that we had out. Obviously, Wade Egan missed out on a couple of games in between there. Chance Nickel-Costa getting knocked out in a couple of games. There was a couple of big moments where, you know, even the Broncos started the season without Reece Walsh. They had a couple of moments where, obviously, Origin period, a whole lot of players out, and they all stayed within that 8 period. Even the Sharkies, where they fell off quite substantially just in form, they found a way to stay within that 8 period. But the Rabbitohs, for some reason, just didn't click into full gear after this little period that they had that they looked like absolute premiership threats. And I really do want to put it down to injury. This is a glass half full sort of take. But if you actually think about it, towards the start of the year, all we were talking about was the Rabbitohs forward pack was not really there to really contend with the big teams, which made it a major surprise when they did take out the Panthers, the Broncos, and the Storm back to back to back the way they did defensively. And they didn't get ripped apart through the middle between those sort of games. But if you actually think about it, they started the season where they had no Havili, and then I think Harm Selly was around there as well. Yeah, David Moale, who's not really, these aren't really key pieces, but these are major pieces to a forward pack rotation. If you think of Tommy Burgess missed a couple of games towards the end of this year here, I think due to suspension and also due to injuries, this and that. Yeah, Jai Arrow missed a couple of really key games towards the end of the year due to injury. But if you look at that Origin period, it's the main period I do want to touch on, where we had Latrell Mitchell go down for a calf injury that got misdiagnosed or misreported the way it did. You know, he was supposed to be back for game 1. Then he was supposed to be back for game 2. And he was supposed to be back for game 3. And it never really happened. And then even after that, I think it was 2 to 3, 4 more weeks after that period that he missed out on regular season football, which was actually like massive to the season for the Rabbitohs. But then to add on top of that, I had Campbell Graham miss a couple of games within that first Origin period there with a sternum injury. Then you had Cam Murray miss a couple of games as well. And then you even had, on top of that, you had Cody Walker miss a couple of games, I think due to a shoulder injury. I think it was a shoulder complaint that he was missing out from. Or was it a quad injury? It was something like that towards the end of the Origin period that ended up causing him to miss that game 2 game that apparently he was going to get picked for. But due to injury, he was not able to go into that contest. So there was a couple of little things that Rabbitohs fans can hold on to and say injuries. And I would agree with the Rabbitohs fan to say, you've been dealing with injuries for a major part of this year. Totola was a massive out through, towards the end of that Origin period, and for that run home, it was a major key out, and a whole lot of people talking about Bloke in a Bar. I heard talking about it, and Rugby League Guru really touched on it a lot. It really showed the importance of Totola to the side when he was out. So a couple of key things happening there, but for them to fall off this sort of hard and not have any cohesion, because in this game, really, if you looked at it, Cody Walker missed a whole lot of big opportunities in this game. A whole lot of balls end up finding the ground, and just a couple of big moments that just didn't look cohesive for even their spine players that usually are all on the same page. So it was very disappointing there. My second reason is definitely going to be a little bit more cynical, and this is one that I know you guys are going to end up maybe even lapping up or even turning down straight away. But April 25th, Jack Whiten signs a contract for the Rabbitohs for the next season coming for, I think it's a 3-year contract or whatever he signed for. And during this period, this was a period after this signing, I think they end up beating the Melbourne Storm at this side. They would beat the Panthers on this time. They were about to play the Brisbane Broncos, which they ended up going Brisbane Broncos, Melbourne Storm, and they beat those two sides quite convincingly in dominant performances between those 2 games. if you actually think about it. So maybe this is not really too much to really look into, but if you look into a couple of weeks later when maybe the media was like swirling around this a little bit more, you had like obviously Ricky Stewart come out and say, protest his feeling for the transfer window and all that sort of stuff. A whole lot of talking around what really happened here. And South Sydney Rabbitohs end up versing the Parramatta Eels on May 19th, where they end up conceding 30 points, over 30 points to the Eels in that game, end up losing that game quite convincingly to a desperate Eels team that wanted to get their season back on track. Then after this, they end up losing a game to the Rabbitohs by 33 points to 26, where they end up conceding another 30-point game. And if you actually take this period as a whole, they end up conceding about 30 points a game, which is really, really crazy to think about. And the reason why I'm touching upon these defensive sort of ends is the best way to know about a team of how cohesive they are and how close they are as a unit is usually defense. Defense in a whole lot of pundits always say it to you guys, and it says everywhere that, defense shows of how close everyone is because you're going to fight for your mate inside. Defense is all an effort thing. It's all mental. It's all, you want to do the most for your team next to you. There is obviously systems of what everything sort of like the way you should be, the place you should be and that. But when it all comes down to the nitty gritty, there's been teams that miss tackles all the time and all that. But there's scramble defense. There's defense to try and hold teams out, just to be next to your man, next to you, just to show up for the boys. It wasn't there for this period. And you can kind of piece it together with Jackie Whiten signing for the side and maybe a couple of unrest players of obviously Isaiah Tass was the big one that obviously for the Jackie Whiten to come into the side is where's Jackie Whiten going to play? Is he going to play center? Obviously Isaiah Tass had a massive part of the period there where he played the Penrith Panthers, the Melbourne Storm, the Broncos and looked amazing in those games. But after this, it was questioning straight away of Jackie Whiten goes into that center role. But then you also got that second row position that they've been missing for a major part of this year. But I also thought that Cheekham did really well in a couple of those early periods of this year. So it was a lot of talk around Jackie Whiten comes to the club and maybe did this unsettle the club a little bit? Did this maybe cause a little bit of the fracture of obviously being Latrell Mitchell's best friend? And I don't really want to lay it down to that because I feel like, it's really good to have players like this of that stature come to your club and it shouldn't really fracture the team the way it should. Obviously they're all professionals, they all need to turn up, but just if you think about it, if you're thinking you're playing your best football for the club, especially in those periods there of the Panthers game where you are absolutely on top of it, defensively, everyone was together. And then you hear Jack Whiten's coming to the club after this period and it's are we not good enough in that sort of position? What do we need different? And even if you look at it now of maybe Ilias has been put under pressure in that 7 role, when Jack Whiten comes to the club, is there a possibility that maybe Ilias drops out and Jack Whiten playing 6 next to Cody Walker? Cody Walker during Q Cup, even if you may not agree that he's a 7 and this and that, during Q Cup, he was a great 7 and he was tearing teams up at the Tigers where he was just absolutely amazing. Could that be definitely an opportunity for them? Or would you rather have Jack Whiten in that second row position that maybe could cause less unrest towards the whole club? Or maybe do you put him in that center role and Isaiah Tass has to shift to the other side? Or, Campbell Graham's got a little thing to think about there. There's a lot of things to think about. So maybe some food for thought here, you guys. I don't know. This second one's a little bit more cynical. I do understand that. It's a little bit more trying to find a reason. And I don't really want to put it down to Jack Whiten as a whole because I think he's a great player, a great addition to the club. But there is a slight period there that when Jack Whiten signed on that this whole team has sort of fallen apart. So comment down below your thoughts on why the Rabbitohs have fallen apart this year. And maybe does it come down to the coach? Maybe does it come down to the coaching staff falling apart the way it did? And a whole lot of unrest maybe happening early on this year. But there's a couple of things that could have caused that. So comment down below your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. Hopefully I get some more content out towards the end of this weekend. Obviously going to the Warriors game. So hopefully I'll get a video out there Sunday night for that game. Obviously I'm going to it today, so put it out Sunday night. So hopefully everything goes well. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Peace out.